So you'll find out how it all turned out. I posted a 5-star prediction video, obviously. It's basically like ding, 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 like all the Audrey things, right? So this book, Booklist Thursday is something that Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand and Lindsey's from I keep wanting to say it's inspired by Mr. Tender's Girl. That's actually the name of the book. I am filming this intro 14 times because I can't get it right. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse and welcome to Booklist Thursday. So today we are going to wrap up my 5-star predictions that I picked about 2 months ago. So Booklist Thursday is something that Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand and Lindsey from Lindsey's Little Library host on their channels every Thursday. And every 2 months they invite someone to collaborate with them on doing 5-star predictions. So I am very grateful that my friends invited me back for a second time and I had a fun time reading these books. I definitely pushed myself a little bit, not like out of my comfort zone, but took some risks. And our theme was to pick thrifted books. So anything that was online thrifted, in-person thrifted, like free little libraries, library book sales, just anything that wasn't a brand new purchase was part of the selection. So I went with an author I know and love and then took 2 risks. So if you guys saw my original video, you will know the books. If you haven't seen my original video, we'll just keep on watching because we're going to talk about them all now. So I'm going to talk about the books in the order that I read them. And the first one is Mr. Tender's Girl by Carter Wilson. So this was actually a book I read in May. I talked about it in my May wrap up. But if you missed that, I'll give you sort of a refresher here. But I also did not disclose if it was a 5-star prediction because I was saving it for today. So this book was inspired by the true crime case of the Slender Man. So there is an afterward kind of Q&A with Carter Wilson at the back of the book. And he says how he heard about that case, started to read about it, was inspired by it and then stopped because he didn't want to be further influenced by what actually happened. So the core of that case is there were 2 teenage girls who basically lured a 3rd teenage girl who was a friend of theirs into the woods, and they wound up repeatedly stabbing her, saying that this fictional, mystical character, the Slender Man, told them to do it. So very messed up as you can imagine. I want to say they were all around like 13, 14 years old. The girl who was stabbed wound up surviving and the other 2 girls went to jail. It's like a whole thing. There's tons of true crime things about it. I was going to watch it, but I haven't done it yet. There's like a 2020 or Dateline special on it. But anyway, this book is inspired by that. So in this book was sort of a twist on that story. We are following a woman named Alice. And when she was 14, 2 of her classmates lured her into the park and stabbed her. And they said that they were inspired, sort of called to do it by Mr. Tender. And the hitch is that Mr. Tender is a fictional graphic novel character that Alice's father actually created. So Alice survived, but the aftermath, as you can imagine, was fairly horrific. So at the time, Alice and her family lived in London. Following the stabbing, Alice's father stayed in London, her parents separated, and Alice, her brother, and her mother moved to the United States. So when this book opens, we're actually meeting Alice as an adult. She is living up in New Hampshire. She owns and manages a coffee shop. She has changed her last name, and she very much wants to distance herself to what happened to her when she was a teenager. So nobody that she works with, nobody in the town, no one knows who she is. She has kept a very low profile. She's very much kept to herself all these years. Her mother and brother still live outside of Boston. She sees them occasionally, but she's very much just sort of separated herself from everything. And when the book opens, she starts to get these messages from someone who knows who she is. So someone has figured out who Alice is, understands what her background is, and is basically threatening her. So this book was so different than I expected because I knew a bit about the Slender Man case, and it very much to me seemed like mysteries in the past, mysteries in the present, someone who has sort of secretly had their identity and has living this very quiet life, and now someone has figured out who they are and they're sort of out to expose her. And while that is sort of the beginning theme of it, this book shot off in so many different directions that I didn't see coming and took me on such a wild ride. It is dark, it is messy, it is messed up. It's basically like ding, 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 like all the Audrey things, right? I very much enjoyed this book. I dog-eared it a ton. I am not going to dive into any of the places it goes or what it does, because I just don't want to give anything away. I went into this book very blind, other than knowing that it was a dark, messed up page turner. So I ultimately gave this 4 stars, and I should have said this originally. I am a tough 5-star giver. I need to really, really obsessively love. I'm gonna read it again and again, like top tier. If I had a bookshelf with my favorite books on it, it would like make that shelf. So I genuinely enjoyed this book. I was completely hooked by it. I would hugely recommend it to people. It's basically like as good or as close to being a 5-star without actually being a 5-star, because again, I'm like very stingy with my 5 stars. And it is not gonna be for everyone, I will give you that, but it was really, really good. And I wasn't sure where it was taking us. It shocked me in a lot of different ways. And again, I kind of thought I was on a certain path, and it took me off the path, and I was glad it did. Like, I love when I'm wrong about this kind of thing, and I love when a book surprises me. And gosh, there's so many things I want to say, but I don't want to risk ruining anything in it. But I really enjoyed it. And I thought she was, like, Alice was a really great drawn out character. Like, she was well drawn in the book. And we get some past and present, and she's obviously revisiting what happened to her. And we don't actually shift back in timelines in a like alternating chapter kind of way, but we get a lot of her history, and we get a lot of what happened to her when she was younger and sort of the years in between. And there's a lot of different sort of investigations going on in here. There's definitely a lot of creep factor, and it was just really, really entertaining. So if you are into books that are inspired by true crime, or just into books that are messy, this would definitely be a good one for you guys. I also talked about Carter Wilson in my podcast video that I did. So he has a podcast, which I didn't connect the dots at the time, but he interviews other authors, and I have listened to a whole bunch of them, and it's really, really interesting. He obviously also has a whole bunch of other books, so I definitely will be reading more from him. And it was good. It was definitely good. I was not sure where this book was going to end up, and it was just, I just don't even know what to say. There were definitely some moments that I was just like, what? It was very good. It was very, very good. The second book I read is the 3rd and final book in the Hidden Iceland series by Ragnar Jonasson, and this is The Mist. And I loved this book. So this is also the Holda series, which I feel like a lot of people know it that way rather than as Hidden Iceland. But I thoroughly enjoyed this book, you guys, and I'm just gonna tell you, it was 5 stars. It was absolutely 5 stars. This is the book that I was feeling super confident about, and I loved it. So it's, like I said, 3rd in the series. I'm gonna keep it very, very vague as well, but I would highly recommend you pick up this series. It is 3 books. It will not, I'm showing you this way because it's also short. There's not gonna be another one that gets tacked on later, as far as I know. Like, it is completed in its entirety, and it is so worth the read. They are quick, compulsive reads. And one of the many things I love about this series is it's told backwards. So just for some quick context, book number 1 in the series is The Darkness. And when we meet Holda, she is a detective inspector in the Reykjavik police force, and she's being forced into an early retirement, and she does not want to go. But she is given 2 weeks, basically, like they gave her the 2 weeks notice, and she starts to work on a cold case. So this is when we meet her later in her career. And then we also get sort of history of her personal life, and we get a lot of hints to sort of earlier in her life and things that happened. So as we move into the other books in the series, so book number 2 is The Island, book number 3 is The Mist, we get to see some of the things that were referenced in earlier books in real time, and then we get, interestingly enough, hold at the end of her story, but in reverse chronological order, if that makes sense. So I feel like I'm being confusing with this explanation. But in this book, let me put this one away. In this book, when we meet Holda, she is being called to a case, and there are bodies that were found in a farmhouse, and she comes to investigate to find out what happens. So one of the other many things that I love about this book, other than the fact that it is told in reverse chronological order, which I think is just complete genius, is what we get in the books is we will see sort of the crime happening without knowing wholly what happened, and then we see the investigation. So it's very interesting to me in the storytelling technique. So it's not just straight up, we found a body, let's investigate. we get that interwoven, but we're also seeing sort of in the past what happened in the crime. I feel like I'm doing a horrible job of explaining this, but I really enjoy the storytelling techniques that he uses. And I just loved Hulda from the get-go when I read book number 1. Wholly invested in her story, really enjoy her as a character. And like I said, as my voice cracks, and as I said before, I loved how her story wrapped up in this book, which I know sounds funny because, again, reverse chronological order. So we're meeting her earlier in her life, but it still manages to tie together all 3 books, if that makes sense. So I feel like I keep saying if that makes sense. But I heard about Ragnar Jonasson. His name has crossed my path a whole bunch of times, but Abby from Crime by the Book is a huge supporter of him, a huge advocate, a huge fan, and I kept seeing him come up over and over again in her recommendations. So I finally decided to give him a go, and my goodness, I'm so glad that I did. So I have since purchased all the books in the Dark Iceland series. There is something to be said for being super diligent about thrifting books. So I've managed to sort of over time gather together all of those books. And then I have also independently, newly purchased his 2 standalone books, The Outside, which I have over here. Yep, you can see it. And then The Girl Who Died, which I need to read. So basically I have purchased all of his books, having read these. Obsessed, can't wait to read more from him. But he's a really smart writer. These are all set in Iceland. He gives such great atmosphere. It is cold, you are there, you are feeling it. I definitely feel like he paints a beautiful picture of what life is like there, of the atmosphere, of the scenarios you're in this book in particular. There are the investigation and where they are in the winter, and you can just feel the cold and everything. I just feel like he does such a great job doing all of that. But he's a terrific writer. I really enjoyed the plots of his books, and I just think he has such great characters in here, and I'm just a huge fan. And I should have said this, I listened to the audiobook of this, and I'm going to check the narrator in half a second for you guys, but I had not listened to the other books on audio, and I really enjoyed this as well. I've been in such an audio mood lately. And one of the things I loved about the audio of this is getting all the pronunciations right, because some of the names are definitely tricky and I was saying them wrong. And just even the locations and things like that. There's definitely, I feel like, often a heightened experience when you're listening to the audiobook of a book. But I loved it so much. Highly recommend the entire series to you guys, and 5 stars, 5 stars. This book was narrated by Amanda Redman. And I also didn't say this, not that it matters, but it takes place in 1987, which I also love. So I just love me some 80s stuff. And the final book I read is The Weight of Lies by Emily Carpenter. And I did a combination of reading and listening to this book. And I would say I have some very complicated feelings about this book. So I 1000% thought this was going to be a very Home Before Dark Riley Sager experience, because we have a book within a book. We have a woman whose mother in this case wrote this famous horror novel. It's the 40-year anniversary coming up. It was shot her into mega stardom. It was based on a true crime. And the daughter is questioning just sort of what that true crime originally was and starts looking into it. And this was not as amazing as Home Before Dark was. So there's so many parts of this book that I genuinely enjoyed. There were so many parts of the story that I genuinely enjoyed, but then there were parts that I just felt dragged a bit. So I'm gonna settle at a 3.5 on this one. That feels right. I've been thinking about this for a couple of days since I finished reading it, and it's not that it's not a good book. So I feel like I'm gonna have to caveat a whole bunch of things here, but it was not what I wanted, which doesn't make it a bad book. I would still wholly recommend this to other people because I think there's a lot of greatness to this book, and I'm gonna explain some of the things that slowed it down for me, none of it being spoilery. So again, family drama. We have a woman named Meg, and what it says on the back is reformed party girl Meg Ashley leads a life of privilege thanks to the best-selling horror novel her mother wrote decades ago. But Meg knows that the glow of their very public life has a hidden dark reality of lies, manipulation, and the heartbreak of her own solitary childhood. So desperate to break free of her mother, Meg accepts a proposal to write a scandalous tell-all memoir. So when the book opens, Meg shows up for a party that her mother invited her to, and then the party got canceled, but no one told Meg, and like nobody's there. And this, we learn sort of very quickly, is a pattern over time that Meg and her mother have a very challenging relationship, and Meg is very used to being let down by her mother. And when she gets approached to write a tell-all memoir about her mother, she hesitates at first, but ultimately takes the opportunity. And part of that memoir involves her going to a place called Bonny Island in Georgia, which is where her mother lived for a bit and where she was inspired for this cult classic horror novel that she wrote. And there was a true crime that happened there, an actual crime that happened there, which is the inspiration for the story. And Meg starts to look into her mother's history there because some of her mother's stories have never quite computed. And I enjoyed the beginning of it, although I feel like it describes Meg as this reformed party girl, but we never see that side of Meg's life. So when we meet Meg, she is kind of already changing her ways, I guess is like a way of describing it. So I feel like we never really knew the Meg that's talked about on the back of the book. And I very much enjoyed the beginning of this book, and then she goes to Georgia. And I felt very dragged down by the beginning of her time at Bonny Island. And this is not a spoiler, but there is this entire thread in the story with these horses, which I feel like ultimately there's a metaphor there. But I felt super dragged down by all the horse stuff, and there were just details which I understand, you know, once you finish the book and you're like, okay, I know why that happened and I know why that happened. But I feel like a lot of it was dragged out much more than it needed to be. And it definitely slowed me down and slowed down my pace of reading it, and like slowed down my desire to pick the book back up at certain points. But then other chapters, I would compulsively like, yep, I gotta know. And I was like hooked back into it. So I know what happens with books, but there were some things that I felt like we could have done without. And then the other thing which I found a bit of a challenge. So the book her mother wrote is called Kitten. And we get excerpts from it, but we will get, and again, not gonna spoil, but it'll say like from chapter 4, and like we'll just get like a paragraph. So it's supposed to be this cult classic horror novel, but I never felt like I understood what the book was about. So like in Home Before Dark, by Riley Sager, her dad wrote this house of horrors. It was like an Amityville. They said the place was haunted. They ran out in the middle of the night. So you knew that it was a story about a haunted house. And when the daughter went back to it, she never believed it was haunted, but weird stuff starts to happen. So you're like, is it haunted or is something else happening here? Whereas in this, even though we got like little hints of some stuff that happened in the past, I never felt like I knew what Kitten was about. So it was getting revealed in the story, but like it didn't have the same impact. I feel like there was never like a tension or an anticipation, and it was more of like it would pick a paragraph from Kitten which would reference something, and then in the present it would reference that same thing. So in the book, the daughter Meg has never read Kitten. She's very much like turned her nose up at it. So she's starting to read the book. So it's kind of like it's being revealed at the same time. But again, we're only getting a paragraph or two here and there. So I found that a little bit hard to like be excited about the book within the book. And then there's like a true crime aspect of it, of other people who had investigated this. And there's these people called the Kitty Cultists, which are like the people obsessed with Kitten. And they are trying to figure out the true crime and what happened back then and what in the book is true and what, you know, what's fiction. And I would have loved more of that, because we get a little bit of that as well, but I would have loved more of it because I feel like that would have been really cool. And the parts we got were really cool, but I just wanted more. So again, I feel like this is a little bit of a case of not the book, but me wanting things to play out in a different way. And not that I was unhappy with the ending. I was not unhappy with how the book wrapped up. I was not unhappy with reveals or endings or any of that kind of stuff, but it was more of how the story was told. I wish some parts of it were told differently, but there were definitely tense moments. There were some super cringy moments. There were some great, that's gonna give something away. there were holy moments that I enjoyed in this book, and it definitely took me on a ride, but there were parts of it that slowed me down. And again, I just didn't feel that same excitement about the book within the book that I have in some other books that incorporate that as a storytelling device. So all in, it was good. It was enjoyable. Like I said, I split time between the audio, and again, I need to look at the audio narrator for you guys because I'm being bad at this. So this book was narrated by Katie Orsini. The audiobook was really good. And I will say, when I was hitting those slow points with it and I decided to find the audiobook, that definitely got me going again and got me more engaged in it. So the audio definitely, I feel like, helped propel the story along more. And then I got to the point where I was alternating between listening and reading, depending on if I was like out and about or doing stuff, or if I was home and like eating or just ready to read or something like that. So for me, the audiobook definitely enhanced the experience. And in hindsight, because I waited probably till I was like 150 pages in before I decided to opt for the audiobook. If I had started with the audiobook, if that would change my feelings about it, but we've already passed that point of no return, so we're just never gonna know. But again, I definitely enjoyed it. I didn't intentionally pick two books that had like a true crime spin to them, but I always love me a true crime. So again, I definitely think it was well worth it. I am curious to read more things by Emily Carpenter. She has more books, and I will be checking them out for sure. So yeah, there you go. So that's gonna do it. I will still count this very much as a success, a 5-star, a 4-star, a 3.5 star, not bad reading at all. And you guys know me, I am not one for a TBR. I also don't usually make 5-star predictions, so this is always like a fun, kind of out of my, not even like out of my comfort zone, but like out of my normal moody reading of something to do. But I am always grateful to partner with Lindsey and with Sarah on anything and everything that they wanna do. If you guys have not already checked out their videos, of course, I have them linked down below so you can see what their feelings are on the books that they read. And if you have found your way over here because of Lindsey and Sarah, well, welcome, and thanks for watching and thanks for being here. So I will be back with another video with, I'm not sure what's gonna be coming up next, but we'll know when you guys see it. So until then, thank you guys so much for hanging out today and for like being here and stopping by and watching and doing all of the things. And I will see you guys in another video when it happens. Have a great day, you guys. Bye.